The local ranchers laughed when Leo, a wounded Navy SEAL, brought home a graying, painfully slow German Shepherd from the county shelter. Hank Miller told him the dog was completely broken, a useless animal that belonged back in a cage. But when a historic flash flood wiped out the main road and trapped a family in the rushing, debris-filled water, that broken dog was the only one who didn't panic. While the rest of the town watched in absolute terror, Leo knelt in the freezing mud and gave his dog one final, silent command. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments which country you are watching from, and if you love stories that melt your heart, please subscribe to support our channel. The Texas sun beat down on the asphalt parking lot. Heat rose in visible waves from the hoods of parked cars. The air was thick and dry, carrying the scent of dust and scorched grass. Leo stepped out of his truck. He placed his left foot carefully on the ground. The injury was healing, but a deep stiffness remained in his muscles and joints. He was a Navy SEAL. His body was his primary tool, and right now, that tool required intensive maintenance. The medical board had given him mandatory leave. They told him to go home and rest. Rest was not a concept Leo understood easily. He operated on momentum and mission objectives. Without a mission, the silence of his rural Texas farm felt suffocating. He needed a focus. He needed a task that required patience. He walked toward the low cinder block building. A painted wooden sign near the entrance read, "County Animal Rescue." He grabbed the metal handle and opened the heavy glass door. A wall of sound hit him immediately. Barking, whining, and the clatter of metal bowls against metal fences echoed off the hard walls. The smell was a potent mix of bleach, wet fur, and anxious energy. A young woman stood behind the front reception desk. She had a messy brown ponytail and wore a green volunteer t-shirt with the shelter logo. Her name tag read Sarah. She had a compassionate but tired face, the look of someone who cared too much in a place with too many problems. She looked up from a stack of files and smiled. "Can I help you find someone today?" Sarah asked. "I want to look at the dogs," Leo said. His voice was calm and remarkably low, cutting through the background noise. "Are you looking for a specific breed? We have some great young dogs right now. Very energetic and playful." "Just looking," Leo said. Sarah nodded and pointed to the heavy double doors leading to the kennel area. "Go right ahead. Let me know if you want to meet anyone outside in the play yard." Leo walked through the doors. The noise doubled instantly. Dogs threw themselves against the fences as he passed. They barked. They spun in tight circles. They wanted attention. They wanted out of their cages. Leo walked slowly down the concrete aisle. He observed them with a trained eye. He saw a young Belgian Malinois bouncing off the kennel walls, practically vibrating with unspent drive. He saw a golden retriever mix wagging its tail so hard its entire body shook, desperate for a human hand. They were good dogs. They were full of life. But they required a frantic energy that Leo did not want to match right now. He needed a different frequency. He reached the end of the first row. The last kennel was cast in the shadows. The overhead fluorescent light above it flickered and died. Leo stopped. A dog lay on the bare concrete floor in the very back corner. It was a German Shepherd. The dog was visibly older. Its muzzle was heavily dusted with gray hair. The ribs showed clearly against its dull, patchy black and tan coat. The dog did not stand up when Leo approached the gate. It did not bark. It simply rested its heavy head on its front paws and kept its eyes open. Leo stood in front of the gate. He watched the dog breathe. The breaths were slow and measured, rising and falling with a steady rhythm. Sarah walked up behind him. She carried a clipboard with intake forms. "That is an older boy," Sarah said. She sounded slightly apologetic. "He came in a few weeks ago as a stray found near the highway. Nobody claimed him. Honestly, he is not very active at all. Most people come here wanting a dog they can run with or take hiking." "What is wrong with him?" Leo asked. He did not take his eyes off the quiet animal. "The vet says he is just old and malnourished. No major health issues on paper. but he is incredibly lazy. He barely gets up to eat his meals. He does not want to play with the toys. He just lies there all day. We have a hard time even getting him out into the yard for basic exercise. He just moves too slow for most families. Leo registered the words, lazy, slow. He looked at the dog again. He saw something else entirely. He saw conservation of energy. He saw an animal that did not waste a single ounce of effort on useless movement or panic. "Open the gate," Leo said. Sarah hesitated. She kept her hand hovering over her keys. "Are you sure? We have a really smart border collie in the next aisle. Very trainable. Open the gate, please," Leo repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Sarah unlocked the metal latch. The gate swung open with a sharp squeak. Leo stepped inside the enclosure. He did not walk directly toward the dog. He moved to the side of the kennel and lowered himself slowly against the wall. He sat on the cold concrete floor. He stretched his injured leg out in front of him to relieve the pressure. He did not speak. He did not extend his hand or make kissing noises. He simply existed in the same space. The shelter was chaotic and loud around them. The other dogs continued their frantic barking and jumping. Inside this specific kennel, it was completely quiet. 5 minutes passed. Leo did not move a muscle. He controlled his breathing. He breathed in for 4 seconds. He held it for 4 seconds. He exhaled for 4 seconds. The tactical breathing exercise slowed his heart rate and grounded him in the present moment. The German Shepherd finally shifted. The dog lifted its heavy head from its paws. It looked directly at Leo. Leo met the gaze. The dog's eyes were a deep amber. They were clear and sharp. They were not the eyes of a broken or defeated animal. They were the eyes of a survivor who had seen the worst the world had to offer and decided to simply endure it without complaint. There was no fear in that stare. There was no begging for affection. There was only a silent, intense assessment. The dog stood up. The movement was incredibly stiff. The joints were clearly tight from age and lack of use. The dog took one slow step forward, then another. It closed the distance between them deliberately. It stopped exactly 2 feet away from Leo. Leo kept his hands resting flat on his knees. He waited. The dog leaned forward and sniffed Leo's heavy boots. It sniffed the denim fabric of his jeans. It sniffed the air near his calloused hands. Then the dog took one final step and sat down right next to Leo. The dog leaned its bony shoulder heavily against Leo's arm, offering its weight. Leo slowly raised his right hand. He rested it on the dog's thick neck. The fur was coarse and unwashed. The skin was loose, but the physical connection was solid and real. Leo looked up at Sarah. She was standing outside the gate, holding her clipboard tight against her chest. She looked genuinely surprised. "I will take him," Leo said. "Are you absolutely sure?" Sarah asked. "He really is not an active dog. He might just want to sleep on a rug all day." "I am sure," Leo said. They walked back to the front reception desk together. The dog followed Leo closely. The dog did not pull on the nylon slip leash Sarah provided. The dog matched Leo's slow, limping pace exactly, step for step. They walked out of the loud kennel area and into the quiet room. Sarah pulled out a stack of adoption paperwork. "Do you have a name for him in mind?" she asked. "We just call him number 42 on his chart." Leo looked down at the dog. The dog sat calmly beside his good leg, watching the glass front door. "Max?" Leo said. "Max?" Sarah repeated as she wrote it down in bold letters. "That is a good, strong name." Leo filled out the forms with a pen. He paid the standard adoption fee. He signed his name at the bottom of the final page. Sarah handed him a thick folder with medical records and a small plastic bag of dry dog food. "Thank you," Leo said. He turned and walked out the door. Max walked right beside him. The brutal Texas heat hit them again. The noise of the nearby highway hummed constantly in the distance. Leo opened the passenger door of his truck. Max did not jump in. The dog looked at the high seat, then looked back at Leo. The jump was simply too high for his stiff back legs. Leo bent down carefully. He scooped his strong arms under Max's chest and back legs. He lifted the large dog smoothly and placed him on the fabric passenger seat. Max settled down and curled up immediately. Leo closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. He got in and started the powerful engine. The air conditioning blasted cool air into the sweltering cab. Leo put the truck in gear. He looked over at the passenger seat. Max was already asleep, his breathing deep and even. Leo drove out of the parking lot. He headed toward his quiet farm on the rural outskirts of town. He had a clear plan. He knew everything about physical recovery. He knew about building strength and endurance from the ground up. He looked at the sleeping dog once more. The shelter staff saw a lazy, useless animal at the end of its road. Leo saw untamed potential. He saw a blank slate. He saw a capable partner for the quiet, challenging days ahead. The real journey was just beginning. Leo's farm sat at the end of a long, unpaved dirt road. The property consisted of 50 acres of flat land, a weathered wooden barn, and a large spring-fed pond bordered by a thick line of oak trees. The silence here was absolute. It was a sharp, heavy contrast to the chaotic noise of the animal shelter and an even sharper contrast to the environments Leo usually operated in. Leo parked his heavy truck near the wooden porch of the main house. He turned off the engine. He opened his door and stepped out, planting his injured left leg carefully on the dry dirt. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. Max was awake. He looked at the high drop to the ground. He did not attempt to jump. He waited. Leo reached in, scooped his arms under the large dog, and set him gently on the grass. Max did not run. He did not sniff the perimeter frantically or mark the nearby tires. He stood perfectly still. He looked at the house. He looked at the barn. He looked at the distant tree line. He evaluated his new environment with slow, deliberate movements of his head. Then he sat down in the tall grass and looked at Leo, waiting for a direction. "Come on," Leo said. His voice was low and flat. He turned and walked up the porch steps. Max followed. He climbed the 3 wooden steps carefully, heavily favoring his stiff back legs. He walked inside the house and lay down on the rug near the front door. He closed his eyes. The first week established the baseline. Leo knew from his own grueling injury that progress required a brutally honest assessment of current limitations. You could not build strength on a broken foundation, and you could not force a body to do what it was not ready for. He observed Max closely. The shelter staff had called him lazy. Leo saw a different reality. Max slept 12 hours a night. He ate his food slowly and completely. He moved with a heavy, deliberate gait. He never barked at the coyotes howling in the far distance at night. He never chased the wild rabbits that darted across the front lawn in the early mornings. He simply watched them with sharp amber eyes. He conserved his energy for what mattered. Leo began the rehabilitation program on day 8. He did not buy plastic fetch toys. He did not encourage running or jumping. He applied the strict principles of tactical physical recovery. They started entirely with mobility. Every morning at exactly 6 o'clock, Leo woke up. Max was already awake, lying quietly beside the bed in the dark. They walked out to the dirt road. The Texas mornings were cool before the brutal sun rose over the horizon. Leo set the pace. It was a painfully slow, measured walk. Leo focused intensely on his own gait, ensuring his injured leg bent properly and carried its fair share of the weight. He wanted Max to do the exact same thing. "Pace," Leo said softly, whenever Max started to drag behind on the leash. He did not pull the nylon strap. He did not jerk the collar. He just stopped walking and waited for the old dog to correct his own position. Max learned the command in 2 days. He matched Leo's limping, steady stride perfectly. They walked exactly 1 mile down the dirt road and 1 mile back. It took an hour. It was tedious work, but it was necessary. During the hot hours of the day, Max shadowed Leo. Leo spent hours repairing the structural damage in the old barn. He replaced rotten wood panels. He hammered thick iron nails into solid beams. The sharp sounds echoed loudly in the quiet, enclosed space. Most dogs would flinch, bark, or run away from the sudden noise. Max simply found a cool spot in the dirt shade, lay down, and watched Leo work. He tracked Leo's hands. He tracked the swing of the hammer. He absorbed the information without reacting to it. He possessed an incredible capacity for stillness that Leo respected immensely. In the second week, Leo introduced the water therapy. He knew gravity was the ultimate enemy of bad joints. The water removed the harsh impact of gravity. The pond water was warm from the summer sun. The bottom consisted of smooth mud and small, flat pebbles. Leo rolled up the legs of his jeans and waded in until the dark water reached his knees. He looked back at the grassy shore. Max stood at the edge, staring calmly at the small ripples hitting his paws. "In," Leo said. He patted his thigh twice. Max did not hesitate. He did not jump or splash enthusiastically. He stepped into the water carefully. He walked forward until the water reached his broad chest. The buoyancy immediately relieved the immense pressure on his stiff, arthritic hips. Leo saw the dog's spine straighten slightly as the weight lifted off his joints. Leo began the exercise. He walked parallel to the shoreline in the waist-deep water. Max followed right beside him. The water provided a thick, heavy resistance. Every single step required deliberate muscle engagement from both of them, but there was no jarring impact on the bones. They walked 10 yards, turned around smoothly, and walked back. Max breathed heavily. His mouth opened wide, and his tongue hung out, dripping water. But his eyes stayed locked firmly on Leo. He did not try to swim toward the shallow end to escape the effort. He stayed right in the resistance zone. Leo watched the dog's physical form closely. The water forced Max to lift his legs higher than he did on land. It forced him to use his core abdominal muscles to maintain his balance against the current. The lazy, shuffling walk he had in the shelter transformed into a focused, powerful march in the pond. They did this for 10 minutes on the first day. They increased it to 15 minutes on the third day. On the 7th day of the water training, the Texas heat was relentless even in the early morning. Leo waded into the pond. Max followed right beside him, pushing through the surface. Leo set a digital timer on his black waterproof watch. 20 minutes, a continuous tactical march through the chest-deep water. They moved back and forth along the bank. The mud sucked at their feet. The heavy water dragged at their bodies. Leo felt a deep, familiar burn in his own injured thigh muscles. He focused strictly on his breathing. In, out, steady rhythm, do not break form. He looked down at Max. The old German shepherd was working incredibly hard. Water dripped from his gray snout. His breathing was loud and raspy, echoing across the quiet pond. The physical exertion was immense for a dog his age in his current condition. At the 15-minute mark, Leo fully expected Max to quit. He expected the dog to turn his head toward the dry land and give up the march. He waited for a whine, a whimper, or a pause in the stride. It never came. Max kept his eyes fixed straight ahead. He lifted his front right leg, pushed hard through the water, and planted his foot in the mud. He repeated the exact motion with the left leg. He established a relentless rhythm that matched Leo's pace perfectly. He found a gear hidden deep beneath the layers of age and shelter neglect. It was not speed. It was pure, unyielding endurance. The watch beeped loudly. 20 minutes completed. Leo stopped moving. Max stopped immediately beside him. They stood in the water, chest deep, catching their breath together. Leo looked down at the dog. The lazy label the shelter staff had given him was entirely wrong. This dog was not lazy at all. This dog was a silent soldier who had just been waiting for a mission that actually made sense to him. "Good boy," Leo said. He reached down and rubbed the thick, wet fur behind Max's ears. Max leaned his heavy head firmly against Leo's leg. They turned and walked slowly back to the shore, leaving a long trail of dripping water on the dry Texas dirt. The physical foundation was built. They were ready for the next phase. The local feed store in the nearby town of Oak Creek served as the primary gathering place for the area ranchers. News traveled fast here. Gossip traveled faster. It traveled fastest when it involved the quiet Navy SEAL who had recently returned to his family farm. Leo visited the store every Tuesday morning to buy grain and supplies. He never stayed long to chat. He bought his items, paid in cash at the register, and left immediately. But people watched him closely. They noticed the heavy, painful limp in his left leg. And recently, they noticed the dog waiting patiently in the passenger seat of his black truck. Hank Miller owned the largest cattle operation in the entire county. Hank was a large man in his mid-50s with a booming voice and a very practical, harsh view of the world. Animals on a ranch had a specific purpose. Dogs herded cattle or guarded the property from coyotes and trespassers. A dog that did neither was simply an extra mouth to feed and a waste of money. Hank sat on the wooden bench outside the feed store with two other older ranchers. They watched Leo walk out the glass doors with a heavy bag of feed balanced on his good shoulder. "Did you see that animal he has in the truck?" Hank asked the others, pointing a thumb toward Leo's vehicle. "Looks like an old shepherd mix," one of the men replied, spitting chewing tobacco into a cup. "It looks half dead to me," Hank said bluntly. "I saw him at the pond yesterday when I drove past the property line checking fences. He was walking that dog in circles in the shallow water. Just walking it back and forth for an hour." A man like that needs a real dog, a young Malinois or a solid cattle dog, not a rescue case that can barely walk across the yard. He is wasting his time trying to fix something that is already broken. The other men nodded in agreement. They respected Leo's military service deeply, but they did not understand his current choices. They thought the combat injury had made him soft in the head. Back at the farm, Leo remained completely unaware and entirely unconcerned with the town gossip. He had a specific schedule to follow. The schedule dictated daily progress. Week 3 of the rehabilitation program required increased resistance to build muscle mass safely. Leo waded deeper into the clear pond. The water now reached his waist. The mud at the bottom felt softer here, offering less stable footing and requiring more core strength. Max followed him into the water without any hesitation. The water covered Max up to his neck. Only his gray head and pointed ears remained visible above the dark surface. Leo did not use verbal commands anymore. He wanted to sharpen Max's visual focus and mental discipline. The military relied heavily on silent communication in the field. Leo raised his right hand out of the water. He held his palm flat toward the dog. Max stopped instantly in the water, treading lightly. Leo pointed 2 fingers to the left. Max turned his heavy body slowly against the strong current and began walking in that exact direction. The physical change in the old dog was becoming obvious to Leo. The patchy fur had grown back thick and shiny from the high-quality food. The ribs no longer showed clearly through the wet coat. The muscles in his hind legs were slowly rebuilding their lost mass. He still moved slowly on land, but the painful, arthritic stiffness was fading with every passing day. Leo watched the water swirl around Max's broad chest. The dog paddled his front legs rhythmically. He kept his breathing steady and controlled, never gasping for air. The panic that most domestic dogs felt in deep water simply did not exist in Max. He trusted the process completely. He trusted the man standing right next to him. Leo signaled Max to turn around. They completed 5 long laps in the deeper water. The physical effort was significant for both of them. Leo felt his own injured leg aching deep near the bone. But the pain felt productive now. It was the pain of rebuilding, not the pain of breaking down. They exited the pond and shook off the excess water. Max lay down in the warm grass to dry in the morning sun. Leo sat on a wooden stump nearby. He checked his black tactical watch. The endurance was improving rapidly. The foundation was solidifying exactly as planned. The loud sound of heavy tires crunching on dry gravel broke the quiet afternoon. Leo looked up from the edge of the pond. A silver pickup truck drove up the long dirt driveway and parked near the old wooden barn. Hank Miller stepped out. He wore a dusty cowboy hat and heavy leather work boots. Max did not bark. He did not jump up or run toward the loud truck. He simply lifted his head from the grass, looked intently at the stranger, and then looked back at Leo. He waited for a command. When none came, he rested his head back down on his paws. "Afternoon, Leo," Hank said loudly. He walked heavily toward the pond. "Hello, Hank," Leo replied. He remained seated on the wooden stump, his posture relaxed but alert. Hank stopped a few feet away. He looked down at the wet dog lying in the grass. Max stared back, unblinking and entirely calm. "I was driving past on the county road and figured I would stop in," Hank said. He hooked his thick thumbs into his leather belt. "I saw you working with this dog in the pond again. Figured I should give you some friendly, neighborly advice, from one rancher to another." "I am listening," Leo said. "You live out here all alone now," Hank said, gesturing to the empty fields. "You got expensive equipment in that barn. You have a large property to manage. A guy in your position needs a proper dog. A working dog. I have a litter of blue heelers dropping next month. Smart, aggressive, loud. They will let you know the second someone steps foot on your land. I can give you the pick of the litter, free of charge. Consider it a thank you for your service." Hank pointed a thick finger directly at Max. "This old boy right here," Hank continued, his loud voice echoing slightly across the still water. "He is just taking up space. He did not even make a sound when I pulled up. He did not even stand up to check me out. A guard dog is supposed to bark. He is completely useless to you out here on a real farm." Leo looked down at Max. The dog breathed slowly and steadily, completely unbothered by the loud man standing aggressively over him. Leo looked back at Hank. He spoke with a calm, flat tone that carried absolute certainty. "A dog that barks at everything tells you nothing, Hank," Leo said. "The loudest animal in the room is rarely the most dangerous one. He is doing exactly what I need him to do." Hank frowned deeply. He clearly did not understand the answer. He expected the veteran to want a fierce, loud protector. He shook his head, baffled by Leo's calm demeanor. He turned around and walked back to his silver truck. "Suit yourself," Hank called out loudly before closing his heavy metal door. The truck drove away quickly, leaving a thick cloud of dust floating in the dry air. Leo sat on the stump and watched the dust settle slowly onto the grass. The profound silence returned to the farm. Max closed his eyes and went back to sleep in the warm sun. Leo knew the absolute truth. They were not wasting time. They were preparing for the storm. Summer dragged into early autumn, though the Texas heat barely retreated. 3 months had passed since Leo brought Max home from the loud shelter. The daily routine never varied. Discipline required absolute consistency. Leo woke at 6. Max woke beside him. They walked the dirt road. They worked in the barn. They trained in the pond. The physical transformation in both man and dog became undeniable. Leo walked with a much lighter limp. The deep ache in his shin bone faded to a dull, manageable whisper. The military doctors had prescribed pain pills and extensive rest. Leo chose movement, resistance, and purpose instead. Max changed even more dramatically. The shelter staff would not recognize the animal now. His coat shone with a healthy, dark luster. Thick muscle packed his previously bony shoulders and hindquarters. He looked like a proper, powerful German Shepherd again, but his core demeanor remained exactly the same. He still slept heavily on the porch. He still moved slowly and deliberately on land. He never chased the wild rabbits that crossed the yard. He conserved every single ounce of his energy. He only spent that energy when Leo asked him to. The water training evolved significantly. Walking in the shallow water turned into swimming in the deep center of the large pond. Leo did not want Max to swim like a normal domestic dog. Normal dogs splashed loudly, kept their heads high out of the water, and burned energy frantically just to stay afloat. Leo taught Max tactical swimming. The Navy SEALs called it combat sidestroke. It prioritized silence, efficiency, and long-term endurance over short bursts of speed. A tactical swimmer needed to move through the water without drawing any attention. Leo adapted these exact principles for the dog. They stood at the edge of the pond on a humid Tuesday morning. Leo wore his standard black training shorts and a gray shirt. Max stood beside him in the grass, completely still. Leo raised his right hand. He pointed a single finger toward the far bank, 40 yards away. Max stepped into the water. He waded forward until the muddy bottom dropped off. He began to swim. Leo watched closely from the shore. He looked for any flaws in the technique. Max kept his heavy body very low in the water. Only the top of his dark head and his black nose broke the surface. His front paws reached forward under the water and pulled back smoothly. He did not slap the surface. He did not create white water or loud splashes. He breathed in a steady, measured rhythm. Inhale, exhale. He moved across the pond like a dark shadow gliding over dark glass. Max reached the far bank. He turned around in the water smoothly. He looked back at Leo. Leo raised his hand again. He tapped his own chest twice. This was the silent recall command. Max swam back. He maintained the exact same pace. He did not speed up out of excitement to return. He did not slow down from fatigue. He reached the shallow water, stood up, and walked out. He shook his coat once and sat beside Leo. He did not pant heavily. Their communication now existed almost entirely in silence. Leo rarely spoke verbal commands aloud anymore. He used subtle hand gestures, body positioning, and direct eye contact. Max understood all of it flawlessly. They shared a specific wavelength forged by mutual respect and shared physical recovery. They both understood the true value of quiet strength. Leo decided it was time to test the absolute limit of that strength. He walked to the wooden barn and retrieved a thick coil of yellow nylon rope. It was heavy marine rope, the exact kind used to secure large boats to metal docks. It absorbed water quickly and became incredibly heavy when wet. He returned to the pond. Max watched him carry the heavy coil. Leo knelt beside the dog. He took a wide, padded nylon tactical harness and slipped it over Max's head. He buckled the heavy straps securely around the dog's thick chest and belly. Then he clipped the heavy metal carabiner of the yellow rope to the steel D-ring on the back of the harness. "Wait," Leo said softly. Leo took the other end of the 50-foot rope. He walked backward into the pond. He waited until the water reached his chest. He stopped. He held the rope loosely in his calloused hands. Leo raised his right hand and pointed a single finger directly at his own chest. Max entered the water. He felt the immediate, harsh drag of the heavy rope behind him. The thick nylon soaked up the pond water instantly, acting exactly like an anchor. Most dogs would panic at the sudden, unexpected resistance. They would thrash around or try to bite the rope in confusion. Max did none of those things. He lowered his center of gravity. He engaged his powerful chest and shoulder muscles. He began to swim. The physical effort was clearly massive. The wet rope pulled tight, creating a straight yellow line between the dog and the man. Max dug his paws deep into the water. He pulled himself forward inch by inch. He kept his breathing strictly controlled. He did not break his form. He did not splash. He just worked the problem. He reached Leo. Leo unclipped the carabiner, praised him silently with a firm rub on the neck, and then walked back to the shore, spooling the rope out again. They repeated the exercise. Leo stood on the shore and signaled Max to swim to a center marker buoy and back while dragging the thick line. Max swam out. The drag increased severely with every foot of rope that entered the water. Max reached the plastic buoy, turned tightly, and swam back. His amber eyes locked entirely on Leo. Leo watched the display of raw, unfiltered endurance. Max completed 5 full laps, dragging the soaked, heavy line. He completed over 200 yards of extreme high-resistance swimming. When he finally walked out of the water after the 5th lap, his back legs shook slightly from the massive exertion, but his breathing remained remarkably steady, and his eyes remained clear and entirely focused. He had not quit. He had not panicked. He had simply executed the mission he was given. Leo unclipped the heavy rope. He removed the padded wet harness. He knelt down in the damp grass next to the dog. "Good boy," Leo whispered. He knew then that Max was fully ready. The physical rehabilitation phase was complete. The old dog possessed a level of stamina and mental discipline that surpassed many human soldiers Leo had trained with in the past. They walked back to the house together in the quiet morning sun. The air felt unusually thick and heavy, hinting at a sudden change in the weather. But Leo felt perfectly calm. He had a solid partner walking right beside him. The weather changed on a Thursday afternoon. The thick, humid heat of South Texas vanished without warning. A heavy blanket of dark gray clouds rolled over the horizon, swallowing the sun completely. The air grew perfectly still. It felt heavy and thick in the lungs. Leo recognized this specific type of stillness immediately. He had seen it off the coast of the Pacific Ocean and in the deep deserts of the Middle East. It was the deep breath nature took right before it screamed. Leo went to work without delay. He did not wait for the local news alerts on the television. He treated the approaching storm like an immediate tactical threat. He walked quickly to the wooden barn and began securing the property. He moved all the expensive power tools to the highest metal shelves. He dragged the heavy bags of grain and dog food from the dirt floor and stacked them on solid wooden pallets. He checked the fuel level in the diesel generator. He filled 4 red plastic cans with backup fuel. He secured the heavy metal shutters over the barn windows. He checked the perimeter fence, ensuring the gates were locked tight and reinforced with thick steel chains. Every action was precise. Every movement had a clear purpose. He worked with methodical speed. His injured leg barely slowed him down now. The months of water resistance training had rebuilt the muscle and fortified the damaged joint. Max followed him closely. The old German shepherd did not get in the way. He found a dry spot near the barn entrance and lay down. Dogs typically reacted poorly to severe weather drops. The sudden change in barometric pressure caused them immense physical discomfort. They paced nervously. They whined constantly. They sought small enclosed spaces to hide in. The dogs on Hank Miller's ranch a few miles away were already barking frantically at the darkening sky, their panic echoing across the empty fields. Max remained entirely calm. He rested his heavy chin on his front paws and watched Leo move the heavy wooden crates. He blinked slowly. He understood the changing pressure in the air, but he chose not to panic. Panic wasted energy. He saved his energy for action. He trusted the man working in front of him completely. The rain started at exactly 2 in the afternoon. It did not begin with a light, warning drizzle. It fell like a solid wall of water. The sound hitting the tin roof of the barn was deafening. It sounded like thousands of small hammers striking the metal simultaneously. Puddles formed in the dirt yard within minutes. The puddles connected and quickly turned into small, fast-moving streams. The dry, cracked Texas ground could not absorb the massive volume of water fast enough. The temperature dropped sharply. The sky turned a bruised, unnatural purple before fading into a premature pitch-black night. Leo finished his preparations in the barn. He locked the heavy wooden doors securely. He looked down at Max. Inside, Leo commanded firmly. They walked through the blinding rain to the main house. The heavy water soaked through Leo's clothes instantly. Max shook his thick coat violently when they reached the covered porch, sending a spray of water against the wooden siding. They went inside the house and Leo locked the front door. By nightfall, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The rain did not stop. It intensified. The local radio station crackled with urgent emergency broadcasts. The announcer read severe flash flood warnings for the entire county. The rivers north of them were cresting past historic levels. The radio announcer listed the specific county roads that were already underwater. Highway 47 was completely gone. The main bridge over Miller's Creek had collapsed. The emergency services were entirely overwhelmed. They advised all residents to seek high ground immediately and stay put. Rescue operations were suspended until the water receded safely. At 8 o'clock, the power grid failed. The lights flickered twice and died. Total darkness consumed the farmhouse. Leo turned on a heavy black tactical flashlight. The bright white beam cut sharply through the dark living room. He walked to the kitchen and turned on the battery-powered emergency radio. The static was loud and harsh. The announcer's voice sounded tight with genuine fear now. The sheer volume of water moving down the valley was unprecedented in local history. Max lay on the rug near the front door. He did not care about the dark. He listened to the heavy rain battering the glass windows. He watched the beam of the flashlight move across the ceiling smoothly. "Stay," Leo said to the dog. Leo walked to the back window. He looked out into the pitch-black night. He could not see the barn. He could not see the pond. He could only hear the water. The sound of the rain was changing rapidly. A new noise joined the relentless drumming on the roof. It was a deep, low rumble. It sounded exactly like a massive freight train approaching in the dark. Leo knew that sound perfectly. It was moving water, but not rain. It was a massive volume of groundwater tearing ruthlessly through the landscape. The rumble grew into a deafening roar. The floorboards beneath Leo's feet began to vibrate violently. He felt the sheer kinetic energy of the approaching flood through the thick soles of his boots. The water from the northern rivers had breached the natural dirt embankments. A solid wall of muddy water, uprooted trees, and shattered debris was tearing down the valley toward the town of Oak Creek. The pond, which had been their quiet training ground for months, was surely overflowing by now, joining the chaotic surge tearing through the fields. Nature was asserting absolute dominance over the land. Leo grabbed his heavy waterproof jacket from the hook. He grabbed the thick coil of yellow nylon marine rope they used for the pond training. He clipped heavy metal carabiners to his black tactical belt. He packed a small waterproof medical kit. He did not know exactly what was happening out there in the dark, but he knew the town was in the direct path of the deadly surge. People would need help. Max stood up from the rug. He shook his body once. He walked to the front door and stood right next to Leo. He did not whine. He did not bark at the terrifying roar outside the wooden walls. He simply waited for the door to open. He was ready to work. Leo looked down at the old dog in the beam of the flashlight. The lazy, broken animal from the shelter was gone completely. A focused, disciplined partner stood in his place, entirely unfazed by the chaos outside. "Let's go," Leo said. He pushed the front door open. The violent wind and heavy rain hit them immediately. They stepped off the porch and walked directly into the raging storm. The real test had finally arrived. The wind howled across the open yard, pushing a solid wall of rain against Leo. He leaned his weight forward and walked toward his heavy truck parked near the barn. Max stayed right at his heel. The dog kept his head low, shielding his eyes from the stinging rain. Leo reached the truck and opened the metal toolbox bolted to the bed. He pulled out a waterproof tactical radio, a bright orange life jacket, and 3 heavy-duty steel carabiners. The radio crackled violently in his hand. The local emergency channel was a chaotic mess of static and panicked voices. Leo tuned the dial to the primary sheriff dispatch frequency. The voice of the county dispatcher cut through the noise, sounding completely overwhelmed. "Unit 4, do you copy? We have a civilian vehicle trapped on County Road 9, near the Old Creek Crossing. A pickup truck with 3 evacuated children inside. The water is rising fast. They are completely surrounded. We cannot get rescue boats in the water. The current is too strong. Do you copy? Dispatch, this is Unit 4. We are stuck on the highway. The bridge is gone. We cannot reach them. We need a helicopter. Helicopters are grounded due to zero visibility and high winds. Nobody can reach County Road 9. Leo knew County Road 9 well. It ran parallel to his property line, just beyond the high ridge. He knew the old creek crossing. In a normal summer, it was a dry, rocky ditch. Tonight, it was the center of a raging flash flood. Leo clipped the radio securely to his belt. He looked down at the muddy ground. Driving the truck was entirely impossible. The dirt roads were already turning into deep swamps that would swallow the heavy tires instantly. They had to go on foot. They had to cross the steep wooded ridge behind the farm to reach the road. Leo secured the thick coil of yellow marine rope over his shoulder. He put the orange life jacket on tightly and fastened the buckles. He looked down at Max. "Let's move," Leo said. He turned away from the driveway and walked directly toward the dark ridge. The hike was brutal. The ground was slick with thick, wet clay. The clay was thick and unforgiving, acting like a heavy anchor on his boots. Every step required maximum effort. Leo slipped twice, falling hard onto his knees in the mud. The pain in his injured leg flared sharply, a burning reminder of his physical limits. His lungs burned, grasping for oxygen in the thick, humid air. He gritted his teeth, grabbed a wet tree branch, and pulled himself back up. He did not stop. Max navigated the treacherous terrain with silent precision. The dog used his 4 strong legs and low center of gravity to grip the sliding mud. He did not slip. He did not complain. He stayed exactly 1 pace behind Leo, matching the grueling rhythm of the climb. The months of deep water resistance training paid off entirely. The dog possessed massive core strength and endless stamina. They reached the top of the ridge after 20 brutal minutes. The wind-up here was fierce, threatening to push them back down the hill. Leo wiped the mud and rain from his eyes. He looked down into the valley on the other side. The sight was terrifying. County Road 9 no longer existed. The entire valley was a violent, swirling river of dark brown water. The water moved with incredible speed, carrying uprooted trees, wooden fence posts, and metal debris. In the middle of the raging torrent, Leo saw the truck. It was a white pickup truck. It sat on a small, elevated mound of dirt that was rapidly shrinking. The water slammed violently against the side doors, splashing up over the hood. The headlights were still on, cutting 2 weak beams through the heavy rain. Leo could see a man standing in the truck bed, waving his arms frantically. Inside the cab, small faces pressed against the glass windows. Leo ran down the steep hill. He slid through the mud, using his heavy boots to control his rapid descent. Max followed right beside him. They reached the edge of the new river. A small group of locals stood on the bank, completely helpless. Hank Miller was there. He held a thin, useless rope, looking at the trapped truck with absolute despair. The water separated the safe bank from the truck by 50 yards of violent, churning rapids. "We cannot reach them," Hank yelled over the deafening roar of the water. "The current is too fast. It will drag a man under in 2 seconds." Leo dropped his medical kit on the wet grass. He uncoiled the heavy yellow marine rope. He assessed the water like a combat zone. The water was a chaotic mess of foam and mud. It did not just flow downward. It spiraled in deadly vortexes that could suck a full-grown man straight to the bottom and hold him there. Large branches and pieces of torn metal roofing spun through the current like blunt blades. The water was a Class V rapid. The debris made it a death trap. A human swimmer, especially one with a compromised leg, stood 0 chance of crossing that gap while dragging a heavy soaked rope. The severe resistance would pull a man under and drown him instantly. A loud, terrifying crack echoed loudly across the water. Everyone looked upstream. A massive oak tree, roots and all, was caught in the main current. It rushed toward the stranded truck like a wooden torpedo. The thick trunk hit the metal bumper with the force of a freight train. The sound of crunching steel mixed with the roar of the flood. The impact shook the entire vehicle violently. The dirt mound beneath the tires crumbled, dropping the truck a few inches deeper into the rushing water. The man in the truck bed fell to his knees, gripping the metal rails in sheer panic. The children inside screamed silently behind the glass. The truck was going to wash away. They had minutes left, maybe less. Hank Miller grabbed Leo's shoulder hard. "It is over. We cannot do anything." "If you go in there, you will die too." Leo ignored him. He looked down at the coiled yellow rope. He looked at the deadly water. Then he looked down at Max. The old German shepherd stood perfectly still at the edge of the raging river. He watched the white water with sharp amber eyes. He did not bark. He did not back away in fear. He waited for a command. Leo knelt in the freezing mud. He looked directly into the dog's calm eyes. He took the heavy steel carabiner attached to the end of the yellow marine rope. He held it up. This was the exact moment. The months of silent training. The endless laps in the quiet pond, dragging the heavy anchor line. It all culminated right here, in the dark and the freezing mud. Leo knew what he had to ask the dog to do. "Max," Leo said softly, his deep voice cutting through the noise in a frequency only the dog seemed to hear. Leo tapped his own chest twice. Leo calculated the physics of the raging water in front of him. The human body was simply not designed to cross a Class V rapid while dragging 50 feet of soaked marine rope. A man stood too tall in the water. The broad surface area of a human chest would catch the violent current instantly. The force would sweep a full-grown man downstream before he made it 10 feet from the bank. Furthermore, Leo knew his own physical limitations. His left leg was much stronger now, but it still lacked the explosive raw kicking power required to break out of a deep underwater vortex. If he jumped into that dark river, the heavy rope would act as an anchor, pulling him straight to the muddy bottom. He would drown, and the people trapped in the white pickup truck would die. He looked at the yellow nylon rope coiled in the mud. He looked at the heavy steel carabiner. Then he looked down at Max. The old German shepherd possessed the exact physical attributes required for this specific, deadly mission. Max had a naturally low center of gravity. His body profile in the water was minimal. He had spent the last several months pulling heavy, dead weight through deep water. He possessed massive core strength and unparalleled cardiovascular endurance. Most importantly, Max did not panic. A normal dog would thrash wildly in the freezing, chaotic water, wasting vital oxygen and energy. Max knew how to conserve his strength. He knew the tactical combat side stroke. Leo made the hardest decision of his life. He decided to send his partner into the danger zone. Hank Miller saw Leo holding the carabiner out toward the dog. The large rancher stepped forward quickly. He grabbed the thick fabric of Leo's waterproof jacket. Hank's face was pale, streaked with rain and genuine fear. "What are you doing?" Hank screamed over the deafening roar of the flood. "Are you insane? You cannot send a dog in there. It is a death sentence. The water will crush him against the rocks. He is an old, broken dog. You are going to kill him for absolutely nothing." The other local men on the riverbank started shouting in agreement. They waved their hands frantically, telling Leo to stop. The noise of the panicked crowd mixed with the terrifying rumble of the uprooted trees smashing against the trapped truck. Leo did not yell back. He did not argue. He reached up and calmly removed Hank's hand from his wet jacket. He looked Hank directly in the eyes. His gaze was cold, focused, and completely devoid of panic. "He is not an ordinary dog," Leo said. His voice was flat and absolute. "Step back." Hank stepped back slowly, stunned by the sheer authority in Leo's tone. The crowd fell silent, watching in disbelief. Leo knelt in the freezing mud right at the edge of the rushing water. The heavy rain battered his face. He held the heavy steel carabiner directly in front of Max. The dog looked at the metal clip. He looked at the violent, churning brown water. The roar of the river was physically shaking the ground beneath his paws. Max knew exactly what the water was. He knew it was dangerous, but he also knew the man kneeling beside him. Leo tapped his own chest twice with his right hand. It was the silent command to act. Max did not hesitate for a single second. He opened his strong jaws and bit down hard on the thick steel carabiner. His teeth clamped securely around the metal. He tasted the cold rain and the sharp tang of the steel. He locked his jaw tight. Max stepped off the muddy bank and plunged directly into the flood. The freezing water hit him like a solid concrete wall. The sheer kinetic force of the current immediately tried to spin his body out of control and drag him downstream into the darkness. Max reacted instantly. He dropped his body weight lower. He engaged his powerful chest muscles. He executed the exact tactical swimming technique Leo had taught him in the quiet pond. He kept his head barely above the foamy surface. He reached his front paws forward under the water, pulling back with smooth, deliberate strokes. He did not fight the main current directly. Fighting the current was a fatal mistake. Instead, he swam at a sharp angle, allowing the rushing water to push him sideways while he drove his body forward toward the stranded truck. On the shore, Leo managed the heavy yellow rope. He fed it out smoothly hand over hand, ensuring it did not tangle in the mud. The rope soaked up the freezing water instantly. The drag increased exponentially with every yard Max covered. Max felt the massive weight pulling on his neck and jaw. His neck muscles strained violently against the resistance. He kept his breathing strictly controlled. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. He tuned out the deafening roar around him. His amber eyes locked onto the white tailgate of the truck 20 yards away. The water was a chaotic, lethal mess. A thick, broken wooden fence post shot through the current like a spear. It spun wildly, heading straight for the dog's head. Max saw the dark shape moving in his peripheral vision. He paused his front stroke for a fraction of a second, ducking his head slightly under a rising wave. The heavy wooden post sailed past his right ear, missing him by mere inches. Max resumed his powerful, rhythmic stroke. The locals on the bank watched in absolute silence. Hank Miller stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. They expected the dog to wash away instantly. Instead, they watched a masterclass in survival and endurance. The dark shape of the German Shepherd cut through the violent white water with relentless, mechanical precision. Max reached the halfway point. The current here was the strongest. A deep underwater vortex caught his back legs, trying to pull his hindquarters down. Max kicked back hard. The thick muscles he had rebuilt over months of slow, painful walking on the dirt road fired with explosive power. He broke the grip of the vortex and surged forward. The white truck sat 10 yards away. The man standing in the truck bed leaned over the metal railing. He reached his arms out desperately over the rushing water, shouting words that the river completely drowned out. Max swam into the slack water directly behind the truck's rear bumper. The vehicle blocked the main force of the current, creating a small pocket of slower water. Max paddled hard to maintain his position. He raised his head high, presenting the heavy steel carabiner. The man in the truck bed reached down. His fingers slipped on the wet metal once. He grabbed the carabiner firmly on the second attempt. Max felt the human hand grip the steel. He opened his jaws instantly, releasing the metal clip. The man quickly snapped the heavy carabiner onto the steel toe ring welded to the truck's frame. The lifeline was successfully connected. Max treaded water behind the truck. His chest heaved deeply. His leg muscles burned with severe lactic acid buildup. The physical exertion was astronomical. But he did not look at the man in the truck. He did not look at the crying children inside the cab. Max turned his head and looked back through the driving rain. His amber eyes found the tall, dark figure of Leo standing firmly on the muddy bank. He waited for his next order. The heavy steel carabiner clicked securely against the metal toe ring of the white pickup truck. The connection was solid. Max opened his jaws, releasing the cold metal. He treaded water in the small pocket of slower current, right behind the vehicle. The man in the truck bed, a local father named David, who wore a soaked flannel shirt and looked completely terrified, stared down at the dog with wide, disbelieving eyes. The roaring flood threatened to swallow the truck entirely at any second, but the yellow marine rope now linked the fragile vehicle to the muddy shore. Leo felt the heavy tension on the line. He wrapped his end of the yellow rope around the thick base of an old, deeply rooted oak tree on the riverbank. He tied a secure anchor knot. The primary lifeline was finally established. "Max!" Leo shouted over the roaring wind. He tapped his chest twice. The German shepherd turned his strong body. He swam away from the truck, pushing back into the violent rapid. Swimming without the massive drag of the soaked marine rope allowed him to move much faster. He angled his head, riding the chaotic current instead of fighting it directly, and reached the muddy shore in less than a minute. He walked out of the freezing water. His chest heaved deeply, but his amber eyes remained clear and entirely focused. Leo knelt in the mud. He grabbed a second, thinner rope and a small orange life jacket. He clipped them to a new steel carabiner. He held the metal clip out to Max. "Again," Leo said. Max bit down on the cold steel. He turned and plunged directly back into the raging river. The locals on the bank, including Hank Miller, watched in absolute silence. They witnessed a physical miracle. The old broken shelter dog swam back into the lethal vortex without a single second of hesitation. He navigated the deadly debris, dodging a spinning rubber tire and a large wooden crate, and reached the truck again. David grabbed the new carabiner from the dog. He pulled the small life jacket up into the truck bed. He quickly strapped it onto his oldest daughter, a young girl shivering uncontrollably. He clipped her securely to the main yellow lifeline. Leo and the men on the shore grabbed the secondary pulling rope. They hauled the line, hand over hand, with all their strength. The girl slid into the rushing water. The current grabbed her instantly, but the main rope held her steady. Max swam right beside her. He positioned his broad body upstream of the girl, breaking the harshest force of the deadly current with his own chest. He provided a physical shield against the rushing flood. They reached the bank safely. Hank Miller pulled the crying girl out of the water and wrapped a thick wool blanket tightly around her shoulders. Leo unclipped the empty carabiner. He attached another life jacket. He looked at Max. "Bring it back," Leo commanded. Max took the metal in his teeth. He swam the gap for the fourth time. The sheer physical toll on the dog was astronomical. His muscles burned with severe lactic acid. The freezing water sapped his core body temperature rapidly. A normal animal would have collapsed from exhaustion or panicked in the chaos. Max operated purely on strict discipline and unwavering trust. He reached the truck and delivered the second jacket. They repeated the grueling process. The men on the shore pulled the second child across the river. Max swam right beside the boy, shielding him from the violent water. They reached the mud. The locals cheered loudly over the roaring storm, but Max did not celebrate. He immediately turned around and looked at Leo for the next command. The water level was rising faster now. The dirt mound beneath the white truck was almost completely gone. The vehicle shifted violently, grinding its metal frame against the hidden rocks below. They had only minutes left before total collapse. Leo secured the final life jacket to the line. Max swam across the gap for the sixth time. His movements were slightly slower now, the deep fatigue finally showing in his strokes, but his tactical technique remained flawless. He reached the truck. David secured his youngest son in the jacket and clipped him to the heavy line. The men hauled the final child across the river. Max guided him safely to the muddy bank. Only David remained in the truck bed. The vehicle groaned loudly under the massive water pressure. The rear tires lifted completely off the ground. "Pull the rope back," Leo shouted to David. "Clip yourself in. Jump." David pulled the carabiner across the gap frantically. He secured the metal clip directly to his heavy leather belt. He climbed over the metal railing of the truck bed. Just as he jumped into the violent water, the massive oak tree that had struck the truck earlier shifted. The heavy roots broke free from the mud. The massive tree trunk rolled heavily over the hood of the white truck, crushing the cab instantly. The entire vehicle flipped backward and washed rapidly down the river, disappearing completely into the dark, swirling chaos. David hit the water hard. The current sucked him under immediately. "Pull!" Leo roared at the men on the bank. They pulled the rope with everything they had. The main line went tight, snapping loudly above the water. David broke the surface, gasping desperately for air. Max swam toward him, grabbing the collar of David's flannel shirt in his strong teeth, helping to keep the man's head above the violent waves. Together, they reached the shallow water. Leo reached out and dragged David onto the solid mud. The rescue was complete. They had beaten the deadly flood. The heavy rain finally slowed to a light drizzle as dawn approached. The pale morning light revealed a completely transformed landscape. The county road was a massive, churning lake of brown water and floating debris. The old creek crossing was gone forever. But the people were entirely safe. Paramedics arrived on the far ridge, setting up a triage center for the rescued family. Leo sat in the wet grass near the edge of the water. His injured leg throbbed with a dull, heavy ache, but he felt a profound sense of peace. Max lay on the ground right next to him. The dog was completely exhausted. His wet fur clung tightly to his muscular frame. He rested his heavy head on his front paws and closed his eyes, looking exactly like the lazy dog Leo had met months ago. Hank Miller walked over slowly. The loud, arrogant rancher from the feed store was gone. He looked down at the old German shepherd with an expression of pure, unfiltered respect. "I have worked with dogs my entire life, Leo," Hank said quietly, taking off his wet cowboy hat. "I have never seen an animal do what he just did. I called him broken. I called him useless. I was entirely wrong. That is a true working dog." Max did not open his eyes. He did not acknowledge the praise. He simply let out a long, quiet breath and shifted his body closer to Leo's leg. Leo looked up at Hank. "He is not a working dog, Hank. He is a soldier. He just needed the right command." Hank nodded slowly, put his hat back on, and walked away to help the paramedics on the ridge. Leo reached into the small tactical pocket of his wet jacket. He pulled out a small, heavy piece of metal. It was a solid bronze Navy SEAL K9 badge, awarded only to the most elite military working dogs who had proven themselves in extreme combat conditions. He had carried it with him in his pocket since he left active duty. He knelt beside Max. He unclipped the cheap plastic tag the animal shelter had provided months ago. He tossed the fragile plastic into the mud. He took a heavy metal ring and attached the bronze military badge securely to Max's thick collar. The metal clinked softly against the collar buckle. Max opened his amber eyes. He looked directly at Leo. The silence between them spoke volumes. The broken dog had found his true purpose, and the wounded man had found his perfect partner. They sat together on the quiet bank, watching the sun rise slowly over the rushing water, ready for whatever mission came next. The story of Leo and Max teaches us a profound lesson about judgment and potential. Society often discards the broken, the quiet, and the aging, mistaking their calmness for laziness and their silence for weakness. But true strength does not always roar. Sometimes it is the quiet endurance, the willingness to trust, and the discipline to act when it truly matters. From my perspective, this is a powerful reminder for all of us. We all carry scars, whether physical or emotional, much like the wounded soldier and the abandoned shelter dog. However, those scars do not define our worth. They are simply the foundation upon which we can build our greatest resilience. When we give someone the patience and the chance to heal, we might just discover a hero waiting for the right moment. May God bless you with the patience to see the hidden strength in others and the courage to face your own storms with quiet resolve. If you believe that every life has a purpose and that no one is truly broken beyond repair, please comment Amen below. If this story touched your heart, please share it with your friends and family. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories.